What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another YouTube video. My name is Brent, and in today's video, we will be going over the differences between using a continuous light versus a strobe or a flash when you're doing studio photography. My job today will be to break those things down to help you make a more informed decision. I have Miss Perla with me back on the channel again today. We are excited to get into this content, so let's hop right in. Let's go ahead and get this out of the way. If you shoot photo and video at the exact same time and you're trying to save time, space, and money, your best bet is going to be to go with a constant light. Don't even need to watch the rest of this video. Now, for those of you that are like me, who prefer to stick with your photography and you want to get nice in the studio, let's get cracking. So for the purposes of today's video, my continuous light is going to be the Zhiyun Molis B500. This is a 500 watt continuous light, and I do recommend that you buy higher wattage continuous lights whenever possible. So this is the continuous light that I'll be using for the entire setup of today. So one of the biggest pros to using a constant light on set is the speed of usability. What you see is what you get. You are able to set this light up very quickly, turn it on, gauge the power, look through the back of your camera, and you'll be able to see exactly the type of shots that you're going to be taking. So I have the Zhiyun B500 set up to 25% power. I have it in the Rembrandt position off to the right side of Perla's face, and I'm going to take a few test shots. My settings currently are ISO is at 125. I have my f-stop at 3.5, and then I have my shutter speed at 1/125th. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2. And I'll do one closer. 3, 2. So quick and easy, very fast to get it set up. What you see is what you get. That is our first pro for the constant light. Now, the strobe that I'm going to be using for today is the Godox 8600 BM. So it's an older model, and it is a 600 watt strobe. I tried to match these as close as possible, but the output in a continuous light at the same wattage as a strobe is not going to be as strong. I'm not going to get too scientific, but it's just not going to be as strong. So we're going to be using the Godox 8600 BM for our strobe. So contrary to using our constant light, our strobes are going to take a little bit longer to set up and kind of get locked into motion. You are either going to have to start taking test shots and playing around with your trigger and your location of your light, or you're going to need to meter that light, take some test shots as well so that you can see exactly how that light is falling on your subject and on the background. And to illustrate this, I have my Godox 8600 BM set up in the Rembrandt position, this time on the left side of Perla's face. And we're going to take a few test shots just to show you all what that Rembrandt position looks like using the reflector. We are using our standard settings. So we are at f8, our ISO is at 100, and our shutter speed is at 1/250th. Let's go ahead and take a few here. Nice. 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. Now take one more. Get close up. Nice. 3, 2. Perfect. So once you get it all locked in and once you get it all set up, it's pretty easy to go ahead and get shooting. And the lovely thing about the strobe is that once it's locked in, you pretty much don't have to move anything. So with great power comes great responsibility, and that is certainly the case when you are using a constant light. You will have some ambient light influence. Unfortunately, the power of these constant lights is not quite enough to knock out all of the ambient light. And this can definitely be the case even more when you're in a studio that allows a little bit more natural light into the space. In my case, we don't have any natural light, but we do have LEDs that are a completely different color from the lighting that I'm using, and it's also kind of casting a little bit of a spell onto my backdrop. So one of the things that I have to do in order to mitigate this is utilize my white balance in camera. So I try to do my best to kind of offset it and find something that I'm okay with. And you'll see in these test shots, it's not going to be exactly perfect, and I'm okay with that. Let's get one here. 3, 2. It is going to favor a little bit on the, I would say, like warmer or oranger side, and that's where I like to kind of stick when I'm using my constant lights, because of course when we shoot raw photos we are able to adjust those things in post. So that's just something that you want to keep in mind, is that ambient light will have an effect on your exposure when you're using a constant light. Now, one of the biggest benefits to using a strobe is that we can cut out all of the ambient light influence in our space. And to illustrate this, I'm using a 600 watt strobe, and without the strobe even being at half power, I'm able to do this. So I'm going to take a test shot really quickly, and I still have my same settings. Aperture is at f8, ISO is at 100, and my shutter speed is 1/250th. So here we go. 3, 2. And this is a nicely well lit Rembrandt portrait. And as you can see, the white balance is a lot more true to a neutral white for my background because I am able to influence every single thing that's going on. And to further illustrate this, I'm gonna turn my trigger off and I'm gonna take another shot. 3, 2. And you will see in that photo that there is little to no ambient light influence going on in my portrait. So this means that I'm able to use this strobe as my only paintbrush on this canvas. This is where strobes really shine through, being able to cut out all of that ambient light. Now, I'm guessing a few of you are probably wondering why I chose the settings that I chose when I'm using the constant light. And motion blur is a huge reason for that. When you are shooting with a continuous light, you do not have the ability to freeze motion. So your shutter speed is going to play a huge role. I personally, if I do not want to have motion blur in my images, do not like to go less than 1/125th. So I'm going to take a shot using the same exact setting. So we're back to the 3.5, ISO 100, and I have my shutter speed at 1/125th. And I'm just going to take a portrait here of Perla and we're just going to move for a few clicks. So let's just do like 3 clicks really quickly. All right, 3, 2, and let's get it. 1, 2, last 1, 3. Now at 1/125th, we get a pretty good freezing of motion, right? But let's say you want it to go down a little lower, right? You can use this to your advantage. So I'm going to take my shutter speed down to, let's say, 1/25th, right? Now that is going to blow out my image, so I do need to compensate. And to do this, I'm going to take my ISO down to 100, and I'm just going to bring my aperture up to about, let's do f5.6. So this is the beauty of what you see is what you get. So now we're just gonna do a little bit more of the same thing. 3 photos. I just want constant movement every single photo, okay? 3, 2, and keep it going. Yep, one more. Let's do 2 more here. Yep, last one. Boom. So what you see is what you get, and you are able to shoot it faster, but now you're gonna start to introduce some blur. Even though I'm shooting at f5.6, which should get everything in focus. But let's make it a little more dramatic. Why stop here? We're gonna take our shutter speed down to 1/5. Okay, ISO is gonna stay at 100. I'm just gonna take my aperture up in order to compensate. So we're gonna go up to let's go f13. Let's go f13. And what I'm gonna do this time, since this is an actual trick, I'm gonna move my camera a little bit as I take these photos. All right, we're gonna do 3 here. 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2, last one, 3, 2. So this can be both a pro and a con, so I don't think this is a positive or a negative. You just have to be cognizant of it. You just have to know, is this the look that I'm going for or is it not? So one of the things to know about the constant lights is that you do have to make sure that you are paying attention to your shutter speed because that is going to have an effect on the motion blur in your image. So unlike our continuous light, strobes actually freeze motion. And this is one of the huge benefits to using a strobe, especially if you're working with a subject who prefers constant movement. You're doing something like a fashion shoot where you're trying to get a lot of shots popped off and you want the model to be moving around and switching up poses very continuously. So I'm just gonna take a few photos here of Perla. She's gonna move around. We're gonna keep our settings the same. Again, ISO 100, f8, and our shutter speed is gonna be at 1/250th. You're gonna be facing me to start. And I just want, boom, just different movement for each pose. And the cool thing about your strobes, everyone's strobe is going to have a different sync speed. So once I set my sync speed to 1/250th on my camera, that is what is going to communicate to my strobe. And I do not need to move my shutter speed from that point. It's not gonna affect my exposure. So I'm just going to leave it at 1/250th. And this is gonna freeze the motion. So each time I click, just give me something a little bit different. 3, 2, we're gonna move kind of quick, 2, yep, 3, 2, good, 2 more, 2, yep, last one, 2, good. So everything should be tack sharp. We're shooting at f8. It's not gonna have any issues. But we can take this a step further. So what we're gonna do now is Pearl, you're gonna line up and profile, and I'm gonna do a wide shot here, and I'm gonna catch her as she's falling forward, right? Just to further illustrate how this freezing of motion takes place. All right, whenever you're ready, 3, 2. We'll do it one more time. And try to get it a little more exaggerated. 3, 2, good. And what we're able to achieve with this strobe is the moment that I snap that photo, we're freezing that frame. So she could be falling even a little bit further. Let's say you wanted to put some wires behind your subject and let them fall a little closer to the ground. You can capture that. This is really great for like if you're doing an athletic shot, someone's jumping in the air, you want to freeze that motion. That is where this aspect of strobes really shines through. So the ability to freeze motion is a huge pro in the box for strobes. So the next portion of this review is going to be a sit down where I am going to be joined with Perla, because I do think it is extremely important to have your model or subject have their opinion be heard, because they are going to be the ones in front of these elements. And I do think that that should inform your decision. So one of the first things that I want to talk about in this instance is just how hot a constant light can be on the model's eyes. You have to be very cognizant about the intensity that you're using. And as higher powered constant lights become more affordable, this is going to be more the case. I was only using my light today at about 25%. And Perla can tell you herself, and I'm gonna let her explain this to you, it's still cooking her eyes, and she doesn't even have like blue eyes. She has darker eyes. So what was the difference in your opinion on how the flash affects your eyes or your vision and the constant light?
Well, the constant light is just like beaming into my soul. It's like brighter than my future. But that, and then you have to constantly just blink. So you have, with me, what I would think it was like taking pictures, you might blink more, which I think we did notice that I did, versus a strobe is kind of going with you versus certainly in your eye.
Definitely. And I've done this with models that have a lot lighter eyes, so like a blue or a gray or maybe even a green, and it is extremely brutal to try to use a constant light, especially when you're shooting like me, because I want to shoot at higher f-stops, so I'm pushing those lights to about 100%. That can really start to weigh on your model. So you want to make sure you're having that conversation so that they are comfortable and you are also getting the images that you want in the end. Now, something that I find to be overrated in 2024 is the difference in ISOs when you're using a constant light versus a strobe. I get that when you're using a strobe, you can kind of set your ISO to about 100 and then you keep it there for some very clean images. But I've shot constant lights all the way up to 1000 ISO. And with the cameras that we now own, this is no issue, right? Unless you're shooting something for print that needs to be blown up extensively, you don't really need to worry too much about the ISO difference, because you can compensate for these things with, when you're using a constant light, your shutter speed or your aperture. So there are some things that you can do to kind of mitigate that ISO difference. But this is something that I wanted to point out in the event that you are someone where this affects you greatly, or you might be using an older camera model. Lastly, and probably one of the most important decisions in your thought process, is going to be price. Currently for strobes, you are going to get a lot more wattage per dollar, and that's going to matter a lot when you're trying to shoot in the studio, you're trying to cut out your ambient light, maybe you want to freeze some motion. Currently, strobes are just going to be the better budget option, and constant lights have not caught up quite yet. They're getting close. There are a lot of affordable options, but I haven't really seen anything affordable outside of the 500 watt range. So getting into that 650, 720, 1200 watts for constant lights hasn't quite made it to the affordable market just yet. If price is no issue for you, then hey, go where your heart lies. But I do think that currently strobes would get the nod, in my opinion, for affordability. All right, everyone, that's gonna do it for another video. All in all, my suggestion is to get proficient in both constant and strobes. Learn how to use both, because we know that with this profession comes change, and you might get a client that prefers one look over the other. So it will be very beneficial for you to have knowledge in both. I really hope that this video was able to give you a little bit of an insight to the differences between strobes and continuous light, and help to inform you in making a proper decision on what you want to buy next, because I do understand that investments need to be made wisely. I also want to give a huge shout out to Perla for coming back to the channel. Perla, where can they find you?
It's Pearls on Instagram and everything else.
Awesome. You know I'm gonna put it right here so you can spell it correctly. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you in the next video.